Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Chris Brunette, and you are listening to Fire Talks. On this edition of Fire Talks, we are meeting with Morgan Matthew. She is one of our professional development educators here with the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control within our Fire and Life Safety section. I'm happy to have her here with me today. We're going to be talking a little bit about food trucks and what DFPC's role is in the inspection of food trucks. So I'm going to kick it off by just asking Morgan to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about herself. Morgan, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Chief?
I'm good, thanks. I'm so glad that you're joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself, how you got started in the industry, what you do for us here at the division, and then probably most important to this podcast, just how you are involved with the food trucks across Colorado.
Sure. Let me see if I can top all that. So I have been working in fire prevention since 2019. And in my first job as a fire inspector for Windsor Severance Fire Rescue in Northeast Colorado, we had a lot of food trucks come through the jurisdiction. And we were just trying to figure out, like, how do we manage these trucks? What kind of permits they need? What we should charge them for fees? And while I was a inspector there, I was starting to notice that there was a lot of confusion between what we knew in the fire code from an agency side and what the industry knew, right? What I was going to look for when I did an inspection on their truck. So I created a program, like a pre-inspection checklist to help truck owners out. So they knew, okay, if I'm going to do this type of cooking, this is what my fire marshal or their staff is going to look for. Um, Fast forward to now, I now work for the Division of Fire Prevention and Control as a fire code professional development officer. So essentially, I get to facilitate education that either I teach or other people teach about fire code related topics, food trucks being one of them. And my role now related to food trucks is with the passing of Colorado House Bill 25-1295, the division has gotten a little bit involved in the regulation of the food truck industry here in Colorado from a sort of sinking and creating a minimum standard and a minimum code to help both local fire agencies out and to help the industry out, sort of have a minimum baseline that we're all working off of. And I kept getting questions about food trucks, and I felt bad for the people who kept asking them because I told them I haven't inspected a food truck in like 5 years. So let me see if I can figure something out. And this past May, I was able to deploy a speaker panel class through the Fire Marshals Association of Colorado that talked about the House bill that came effective this year and sort of different people that are involved in the industry, from a gentleman who helped with the bill drafting on the industry side and getting it through state legislature, to people who fabricate trucks. Denver Fire was there. We had Golden Fire Marshals. Brett Ballantyne was there with us. We had the state health department. And then other people that are part of the industry that all make the food truck industry run successfully.
That's so good. I have to tell you, I recall back in the early 2020s, just being part of one of the Northern Fire Marshals meetings, and you were presenting as you were in your former role, and talking about the food trucks. And at the time, I was so impressed with your depth of knowledge. And here we are today in 2026, and I'm just so proud and so glad that you are part of our team here at DFPC, helping us lead the way with this food truck um, inspection bill that recently came out in 2025. You had mentioned it. It's House Bill 1295 from 2025. And it kind of changed the whole world for us related to food trucks. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that bill, because so much of what we're trying to do today is a result of what was in that bill. So maybe first and foremost, can you give us a breakdown of that bill, and first maybe talk about the reciprocity and how that works?
Sure. So prior to that House bill being passed, food truck operations and their inspections on both the health and the fire side were sort of wildly different agency to agency, as well as region to region. So when I was an inspector in my first inspector role, we ended up being part of sort of like a regional group in Northern Colorado. So that was like Fort Collins, Colorado, all the way down to about the Brighton area. But then Denver Fire had their own program. There was a group of mountain fire marshals. So from like the Idaho Springs to like Rifle area had their own program. And then our wider industry group within the state, FMAC, ended up trying to sort of bridge the gap. So they ended up taking the pre-inspection form that I developed to provide better stakeholder education prior to getting inspections, and they created a form, but we were still as a state struggling with the fact that there were no minimum inspector qualifications. So anybody could inspect a food truck and sign off on them, which some people were saying, you know, they would do more thorough inspections than other agencies. So there wasn't this sort of minimum inspection standard. And we were getting feedback from the industry about like, well, so-and-so lets me do this, and you're telling me I have to do this now, right? So that was a problem, that we didn't have sort of minimum inspector qualification standards. The second thing that the bill tried to tackle was just this idea of reciprocity overall. So in my experience working at Windsor Severance, I was hearing from food truck owners, you either operated in Denver and stayed in Denver, or you operated outside of Denver. Part of the reason for that is Denver on the health side actually has their own public health department. They are not under the governing authority of our state health department, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So if a food truck got a inspection from a CDPHE contractor, like at the county level, or actual CDPHE staff, that would not translate into being able to operate on the health side in Denver. So food trucks, if they wanted to be inside and outside Denver, had to get essentially 2 fire inspections and 2 different health inspections from people. So that was tricky for a lot of people who were operating food trucks. So the bill aims to sort of smooth that out. So if a truck gets their health inspection and passes it from Denver Public Health, then they can go anywhere in the state, and CDPHE will honor that health inspection. Same thing with the fire side too, right? And this goes across the whole state. So like, let's say I was a fire marshal in a jurisdiction in some part of Colorado. I couldn't tell a food truck owner, no, you have to get a full-blown inspection from me when you've already had one, because I'm supposed to honor the reciprocity of that other agency doing the inspection, right? Barring like any crazy stuff that has happened on the food truck between when that agency saw the truck and when I'm seeing the truck, right? We know stuff rolls over the road, things rattle inside food trucks. Maybe it's been a while since they've been inspected and stuff needs to be looked at again, like fire extinguishers, their hood system, stuff like that. But the bill of this aims to do that, to make it easier for food trucks to travel from one space to another within the state. I would like to caveat that though, if you're going to operate in multiple jurisdictions, so like multiple cities, multiple counties, you still have to get appropriate sales tax and other zoning licensing stuff signed off on for every single jurisdiction you go into, right? So if I own a food truck and I got it signed off by Denver Fire and Denver Public Health Department, but I want to go run my food truck at some event, let's say in Golden, I have to work with the city of Golden and potentially Jefferson County to make sure that I have all my licensing tax paperwork all sorted and squared away before I start operating. So there's no reciprocity from the sort of tax side. You will still have to make sure that you meet those requirements in every single jurisdiction you operate in.
No, that's a good clarification. Thank you for that, Morgan. And thank you for all that information you just shared. I think it was very complex, and it sounds like it was a difficult sea to navigate in the past. And this House bill brought some clarity to it, especially when it comes to those minimum certification standards and the reciprocity. I think the other thing it did, though, is it standardized the fire codes for all jurisdictions. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so that was part of our role at the division, was to help update the legislation, which you helped with, Chief, right? So you added essentially like 2, I would say, amendments. You probably have a better term, technical term for them. But when the bill was passed, there was like a caveat put into the bill saying that the division needs to add 2 pieces of information to that, right? what our minimum inspector standard is. So as of right now, the bill is written as you need to have your DFPC Fire Inspector 1 certification in order to do an inspection that a food truck can use as part of that reciprocity requirement under the bill, right? Anybody is still allowed to inspect a food truck, but if you don't have at least your Fire Inspector 1 certification from us, then your inspection cannot count towards the reciprocity requirement, right? So just so people can keep that in mind. The other thing too, yeah, that we struggled with definitely was Colorado has this cultural paradigm that people may not be familiar with, which is local rule. So for the most part, state legislation, especially the stuff tied to our agency, is written in a way that gives sort of a minimum standard, but local agencies are allowed to require things above and beyond our minimum standard. And that was the point of this bill as well, right? The House bill was written to maintain and keep intact the local rule culture that we have here in the state of Colorado. So we were able to do three things, right? The reciprocity, minimum inspector certification, and then we also standardized the fire code, which was good because for any food truck in the state, you could end up somewhere where they're in the newest version of the International Fire Code. There is no fire code adopted, or there's a version that's so old, there's nothing mentioned about food trucks in it. So the state bill adopted that minimum code standard so that any jurisdiction who is inspecting trucks in order to meet the reciprocity requirements are all on at least the same fire code, right? They can certainly adopt policies or make amendments within their jurisdiction to make it more restrictive, but they can't lessen the code. And we've adopted the 24 IFC for food trucks without any amendments, so as to reduce confusion at the local level.
Yeah, no, and I think that's good to point out is we adopted that code for the food trucks after outreach and feedback from our local jurisdictions. We wanted to make sure that we were adopting the right code for them, and so it was based on their feedback. Same with the certification standards. We made sure that setting it at that Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control Fire Inspector 1 certification was the right move. And based on the feedback we got, it was. And so we've done that now. We've kind of fulfilled our requirements under House Bill 25-1295. But because we are now involved with the food trucks, we're getting an awful lot of questions about these food trucks and how we're supporting it. And we've kind of gone a little bit further than what's outlined in the bill. We are trying to support in other ways, just because our role here at the Division of Fire Prevention and Control is to support our local jurisdictions. We want to see that local control, but we want to see it in a place where we're able to support it and make sure that our local enforcement agencies have the resources and the support that they need to do the job that they need to do. And so maybe talk a little bit about what that support looks like and what we're doing to partner with our local enforcement agencies.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do at this agency is we definitely field questions, and if we can answer them, we answer them. I personally have been working to get a better understanding and better networking within the industry. So for the May Fire Marshals Association of Colorado meeting and training, we did that speaker panel, right, where I had people from the propane industry, fabrication, the bill, industry bill sponsors, IROL, so inspections reports online, which I'll talk about, a program that we're trying to get stood up for the state. A couple different fire marshal staff, the health department, right, and then fabrication, so that we could all, at least on the fire side, I think sometimes we don't have as many opportunities as I personally would like for us to interact with people outside of our industry, right? So that we can understand, oh, okay, so you work on that, I work on this, and then we sort of see where we meet in the middle and we create innovation. And that was the whole point of that training, was to get all these people in the room so that we can understand, oh, so like what does a fabricator look at when they do a truck, right? We came to a couple really big sort of ideas in the class, which is currently at our state level and then also at the national level, there is no standardized food truck fabrication standard or code. which for the fire code staff is a little bit tricky because that means we pretty much find food trucks after they've already been built. And hopefully they've been built in a way that's going to meet the cooking and food service requirements of the food truck owner and also meet the fire code, right? So that was one of the things that we were trying to tackle with that training. We also got a lot of ideas for upcoming training. As people are asking me questions, I'm taking down information about like, oh, sounds like we probably need to do a training on this topic or this topic, right? In greater detail so that we're all feeling a little bit more comfortable about how to tackle these operations and make them successful. The next thing that we're working on, which you spearheaded, Chief, was working with Inspection Reports Online, who's now under Brycer in the compliance engine. We are working to get into a state contract a food truck inspection platform that's electronic that will do the fourth thing that was an issue sort of in the industry for Colorado, which is data sharing across the whole state. Previous to this effort, everything was done jurisdiction by jurisdiction, right? So if they use an electronic inspection platform, that's fine, but only the staff in that jurisdiction could take a look at it, right? We were relying on food truck owners to keep track of usually their printed or emailed paper inspection reports, which those operators handle a lot of paperwork. So sometimes in my personal experience as an inspector, I'd roll up to do an inspection asking for the previous fire district's inspection, whether it was mine or somebody else's, and they couldn't produce it, right? So the goal of the iRoll platform is to create both good data sharing, access to anyone in the state who touches food trucks, right? Whether that be somebody who's an inspector who has the qualifications to do an inspection and sign off on one, or maybe an agency that doesn't have dedicated staff to that, but they still have food trucks coming into their jurisdiction and they still want to understand, like, did this truck have any outstanding violations I need to be worried about? Were they fixed, right? Does everything look good on this truck? Has it even been inspected, period? Yeah, and then also creating a minimum inspection standard, right? If we're all using that same form and we're looking at, let's say, these 30 things on this form, that'll help tighten up consistency jurisdiction to jurisdiction with what we're actually looking for on a truck, which will help the industry too.
Yeah, no, I think it really will. And you give me a lot of credit there, but I don't think much credit is due. I kicked off the conversation with iRoll, now Brycer, but that was after many fire marshals approached me and said, hey, we think this might be a good solution, but we need one place for it to land. And it seems like the division is the right place for that. And so that's when I reached out to iRoll and we started the conversations. But now most of those conversations that are taking place involve and are run by you. And so I have to say, I appreciate everything you're doing so much for not only the inspection platform that iRoll is developing, but everything related to food trucks and how you've really taken it on and you are the go-to person within DFPC. So I appreciate that, Morgan. And I don't think, I've thanked you enough for everything you're doing there, but I appreciate it. Obviously, as everybody can hear on this podcast, you are our subject matter expert when it comes to this, and I appreciate it so much. So I just real quick, I want to say you're listening to Fire Talks with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control here in Colorado. My guest today is Morgan Matthew, and we are talking about food truck inspections and the recent developments here in Colorado related to those. Morgan, the last thing I kind of want to touch on is, because you've been so involved, I know that you're getting a lot of questions, and I think this is a good opportunity to just kind of cover some of those more frequently asked questions and maybe get the answers out there so that, not only can people call you and ask those questions, but maybe if they're listening to this, they get their answers here. So maybe what's one of the most frequently asked questions you get, and what's your answer when you do get it?
Yeah, so I've gotten a handful of questions, and I'm actually going to ask questions of the listeners too, right? That I don't have answers to, and we cannot put a stake in the ground about at the division, right? Because we don't have enforcement.
Yeah.
So a couple questions I've gotten is how often are we going to do this, right? How often am I going to make a food truck come back in for fire inspection or in order to renew that fire inspection paperwork for the reciprocity stuff? The House bill does not say specifically what that time frame should be. And we got this question and we're hashing it out in my class. A lot of agencies are thinking maybe annual would be a good idea. Sometimes that doesn't align with health department stuff though. And then we had questions about, okay, well, let's say we all as an industry in the state decide, every year food trucks have to come in and to renew their fire inspections with somebody who's certified. Are we going to do that starting January 1st is when you get your renewals, or 1 year from the anniversary of when your truck was inspected? So if I get my truck inspection on July 4th, then I have a year until then to use that inspection. And then it expires on the next July 4th. So that is a logistics question that I think the locals and some of our industry groups will have to sort of hash out and figure out, because the bill does not give us at the state any ability to enforce anything specific related to food trucks, right? Because we wanted to maintain that local control.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And to your point, we statutorily, we had the requirements or the obligation to set the minimum certification standards and the minimum code adoption, and we've done that. But it does seem like that needs to be something that is decided on and memorialized, so that not only food truck owners, but inspectors across the state understand what the expectation is. So I'm glad you're working with local jurisdictions on that. What else are you hearing out there?
Well, a bigger question, a 30,000-foot question is can the bill be changed? And I said, it can, but it's going to have to go all the way back through the state legislature, which takes a while, and it may come out on the back end very different than even how you wanted it to be updated. So my recommendation to everybody was, if you all can try to figure this out at the local level, right? Be it like we're going to inspect food trucks annually or whatever time frame you decide, we will support you in whatever you decide, right? That doesn't mean we can help you enforce that. But if you all come to a conclusion of like, okay, we're all going to do it every 12 months, and let's say everybody's stuff expires on December 31st, then we can help put out the messaging that is what the industry as a whole is collaborated on. Yeah, they were pushing hard to change the bill, and I was like, let's figure it out in the field first before we try to wrestle this thing again. So, and we're going to see more stuff as agencies get more comfortable with the bill and its requirements and the reciprocity stuff. So we're going to figure out how things are working or not working and how we need to move forward from that.
Yeah, no, I think that was really good advice,
Yeah.
Again. So again, just another reason why I'm glad you're out there and helping lead the way on this. So
Yeah.
any other frequently asked questions you want to share?
Yeah, I have gotten calls from agencies that they are getting inspections from fire jurisdictions that may not have certified staff. Just a reminder, anybody is allowed to inspect a food truck, right? It is a commercial operation ending up in your jurisdiction. But just remember, if you don't have the DFPC Fire Inspector 1 certification, which we consider like you can do anything that's a maintenance inspection, then your inspection won't count towards the reciprocity. And one of the things that we're trying to figure out with iRoll is we actually publish all of our DFPC certified people on lists on our website, right? So you can see if you're on the Fire Inspector 1 list, the 2 list, or the Fire Inspector 3 Plans Examiner list, right? Any of those groups can inspect a food truck and do that sort of, I would call it like a sign-off inspection. And so we're hoping with iRoll that when we're building the platform with them, that just automatically siphons that information off of our website, so that when they create the platform, there could potentially be 2 versions of it. One version, like I mentioned, if you're on those lists with us, right, is either contracted with a jurisdiction as a third-party fire inspector, or you actually work for an agency as an employee, you're on that list. So you could pull up iRoll and do an inspection on a food truck, edit an inspection report, add your own documentation, photos, stuff like that. Cool. And then the other group of people would be the people who are working with food trucks in some capacity. So it could be a fire agency, maybe a health agency of some kind, and they have read-only access, right? I can't make any promises about that, but that was one way we were thinking about partitioning the application so that we would give the most accessibility to the most people across the state. And another thing about that iRoll platform too is food truck owners can definitely sign up to the platform and they can put their own truck information into the platform. We would recommend that they do that before they try to come in for any sort of inspection, especially a fire inspection, because then it'll be really easy for whichever agency you're going to for your fire inspection, that they can just immediately pull up all your stuff, just confirm everything's correct, right? Like, I think we're going to put in like make and model, VIN number, license plate, who the owner is versus who the operator is, because oftentimes those two people aren't the same, and identifying information like that. So if I'm an inspector and I see a truck, right, that is one of 12 trucks owned and operated by a company, I know this is truck number 9, and I'm tying my inspection report to truck number 9. So that would help too. And then the food truck operators will be getting, the app has capability for the inspector to immediately send off their report. So as long as there's data, right, somebody has internet connection of some kind on their tablet or whatever device they're using on their inspection, they should be able to pretty instantaneously get a copy of that report so that everybody can take a look at it and make sure like there aren't any questions. They know what they have to fix if stuff has to get fixed and things like that.
Yeah, no, I just think the more we talk about this platform and the more we see the progress being made on it, I think it's going to be a game changer. This is a big deal to try and coordinate these inspections on all the food trucks in the state, across the state. And so the work that iRoll is putting into this to make it something that we can use throughout Colorado is a big deal, and I'm looking forward to getting it going. And again, thank you for all your help and with that coordination with them. So, well, we're just about out of time here, Morgan. Do you have any last words or recommendations for everybody before we leave?
Well, I have one more question for the group, which you all can sort of chew on a little bit. So since the bill was enacted in January 1st of 2026, it'd be interesting to know how agencies are going to enforce current fire code requirements like type 1 hood systems. So those are the hoods that have ventilation and suppression underneath them for operations that create smoke or grease laden vapors, right? So think like frying operations, any operations that use any sort of animal fat products, right? Where we're creating sort of that greasy smoke that we need to provide better protection for. I've had questions about this and I don't have an answer. There's many ways we could probably answer this question, but it'd be interesting to see as a whole how the industry is going to handle enforcing the 24 IFC requirements on food trucks that pre-existed prior to the bill. Just food for thought. Let you all mull that over.
There you have it, folks. So we're leaving you this podcast with some homework. So if you want to get with us, you can always reach out to us. And Morgan, I don't know if you want to share your email address, but you're certainly welcome to, so that people can reach out to you about this.
Yeah, sure. So I have a very long email, so bear with me here. It is Morgan, spelled MORGAN, .Matthew, MATTHEW, at state.co, as in Colorado.us. And you're welcome to contact me there, not just about food trucks, any of the other programs that we work with at the state, right? Fireworks, public schools, casinos, fire suppression, healthcare, waste tire facilities. And you can also contact me about other things too, because if I don't have an answer, somebody else I know probably does.
Thank you, Morgan. Yes, Morgan is one of our experts in so many areas. We've been talking about food trucks today on Fire Talks with the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control, the Fire and Life Safety section. But Morgan is is a valuable resource for so many things, as you just heard.
So if anybody has any more questions about food trucks or wants to understand all the lanes that we're driving in within the food truck industry, there is a great opportunity coming up. Maxim Trailers, owned by Maximo Valdez, who helped me with my food truck class in May, is putting on a free food truck expo at the Denver Coliseum on Monday, June 29th, 2026. It'll go from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And there's going to be a whole bunch of cool stuff happening. We're going to have speakers from across the industry on the main stage. I've got Bob Sullivan, our National Fire Protection Association rep, who's going to talk about NFPA's code and standards development and their code or their standard for hood suppression operations under NFPA 96 will be there to talk. There's going to be a bunch of vendors there. I'll be there. We'll have a table as the DFPC. And if anybody wants to see or get some practice doing food truck inspections, Denver Fire will be doing food truck inspections at that event. And they've graciously allowed us to share information about how to get signed up with them to RSVP if you want to do food truck stuff. So if you want to work with Denver, you can email their email for the program, which is D as in David, F as in Frank, D as in David, mobiles, spelled MOBILES, all one word, at denvergov.org. Or you can call their retail food inspector number, which is 720-913-3405. Denver asked that if you do want to participate with them on those food truck inspections, if you could please RSVP so they know if 2 people are showing up or 80 people are showing up, and so they can plan accordingly. And then if you want to register for the event, you can go to maximtrailers.com/expo. So Maxim is spelled MAXIMTRAILERS.com/expo. And again, that will be at the Denver Coliseum, which is 4600 Humboldt Street, Denver, Colorado, 80216. Hope to see you all there.